Lean and mean games that you can finish without having to smother your social life with a pillow obviously has an undeniable appeal, but the draw of a gargantuan experience that promises endless, dozens of hours of gameplay can be hard to resist, if the game is good at least. We've had several such games in 2024, with the year winding down now. Here, we're going to talk about the ones that stood out to us the most. Stalker 2: Heart of Chernobyl. Stalker 2 made grand promises about its size and scope leading up to launch, and it makes good on those promises without a shadow of a doubt. Even seeing the main story alone to completion requires a hefty time investment, but if you're trying to experience every single thing the game has to offer, you're easily going to clock in at least 100 hours, if not more.
I scared him away.
Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is exactly the sort of game for you if you like pouring endless hours into a single game. Like its 2020 predecessor, it lures you in with the promise of a large, authentically created environment and flight simulation mechanics, while this time there's an even greater amount of content and attention to detail in general to be impressed with here. Chances are, if the game gets its hooks in you, you're going to keep coming back to it for some time to come. Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. A long Like a Dragon game? Who would have thunk, huh? Of course, almost dauntingly long runtimes have been a key characteristic of Yakuza games for a long time now, but even by series standards, Infinite Wealth is particularly beefy. Even the quickest of playthroughs of this colossal RPG can easily take between 50 and 60 hours, but players who want to experience everything in the game are easily looking at over 100 hours. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Epic doesn't begin to describe the scope of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The developers truly went all out with this game, as illustrated by just how much has been crammed into the experience. This is a massive open-world RPG that, if in addition to the main story you're also doing all of the side quests and every single side activity while taking the time to thoroughly explore the map, can keep you glued to your screen for upwards of even 150 hours. Palworld. In its early access form, Palworld isn't technically a finished game, but Pocket Pair's open-world survival MMO is still a sizable game. How sizable exactly? Well, given its genre, it is designed around being highly replayable, which gives it an inherent leg up in this area. Though a 30 to 40 hour playthrough is technically enough to get through the game's critical path, Palworld has enough meat on its bones to keep you occupied for more than twice as long. Helldivers 2. The beauty of endlessly playable live service multiplayer games like Helldivers 2, i.e. the good ones, which is admittedly a bit of a rare breed, is that you can play them almost infinitely. Not literally maybe, but Arrowhead Game Studios' co-op shooter is so incredibly well made and boasts such a strong core gameplay loop that many have already clocked in an almost unreasonable amount of time into the game since it came out earlier this year. Once Human. Starry Studios' open-world multiplayer survival game Once Human is definitely a flawed piece, with issues such as some tedious mechanics, combat issues, rough storytelling, and more dragging it down. There is, however, plenty to enjoy here as well, and if that stuff does end up grabbing you, the good news is for you that Once Human has no shortage of content to get lost in. Throne and Liberty. We've mentioned a few multiplayer-centric games here that find different ways to keep players coming back, but that is, of course, baked into the very DNA of an MMORPG. That is admittedly a genre with a historically low hit rate, and though Amazon Games' Throne and Liberty is far from perfect, it does give players plenty of reason to keep diving into its fantasy world. Grindiness may be an issue, but at least there is plenty to do. Tekken 8. A good fighting game has several tricks up its sleeve to keep players glued over a prolonged period of time, and Tekken 8 is one of the very best fighters out there, which means this is the sort of game that you can completely lose yourself to. You can technically see the game through to full completion in about 20 hours or less, but Tekken 8 delivers one of the most addictive and captivating fighting experiences out there, which means pouring in that amount of time multiple times over is very much conceivable. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a very different kind of fighting game from Tekken 8, but it too is not only good enough, but also substantial enough to keep players busy for long stretches. The core mechanics are immaculate, there's plenty of content on offer, Dragon Ball fans can spend days upon days just pitting an infinite combination of characters against each other. Rise of the Ronin. Team Ninja's open world debut did not go as well as many would have hoped, and Rise of the Ronin is certainly nowhere near as good as the Neo games, but though it's got its share of rough edges, it's also undoubtedly a large game. It does suffer from rote and repetitive design, which means not everyone may have had the patience for everything that the game encompasses, but given the fact that the combat and traversal mechanics always remain highly enjoyable at their core, spending close to 100 hours playing Rise of the Ronin might have some appeal. Satisfactory. Over 5 years in early access had assured many that Satisfactory would be good, and sure enough, it is good. So how good? Well, just its main story alone requires over 100 hours, while a completionist run is going to take you roughly twice as long. And in spite of those daunting demands, this is still a game that those who have played it will heartily recommend to you. That's how good Satisfactory is. Dragon's Dogma 2. Sticking to the critical path to finish the main story will see you putting roughly 25 to 30 hours into Dragon's Dogma 2, but honestly, that's one of the worst possible ways to play this game. This open-world action RPG constantly begs players to go off of the beaten path, mess around with its sandbox systems, follow your curiosity, and be distracted by the abundant optional content on offer. There's lots to do in Dragon's Dogma 2, the majority of which is a blast, to the extent that even a comprehensive 100-hour playthrough can pass by in a flash. Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree. From Software has made it a habit of delivering expansive action RPGs that can keep you busy for long stretches, and Elden Ring's expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, doesn't buck that trend. From a lengthy critical path to plentiful side content to a number of difficult-to-find secrets, Shadow of the Erdtree has no shortage of things to do. And thanks to its slick combat, engrossing boss fights, and eye-popping art style, you're going to have an absolute blast as you're doing all of it. Granblue Fantasy Relink. Simply playing through its main story is solid enough as a way to get a taste of Granblue Fantasy Relink. But Cygames Action RPG is at its best when you truly dive into its co-op offerings, optional content, and its sizable endgame. Repetitive quest design and grindy progression can be grating, but the game's pros outweigh its cons, which is why so many of its players have happily sunk in over 100 hours into it. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.